Okay. I think most of you know Kelvin, but I will refresh your memory and talk about his three books: After the Afterlife, Overcoming the Fear of Death, and Marcus Aurelius Updated. He is author, meditation teacher, and life after life expert. And then we have the pleasure of having his daughter, Samantha
Hi,
Chin, with us
everyone.
today. Say hi, Samantha. We're
Hi,
so excited to
everyone.
meet you.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
So, we Kelvin and I had talked about last. That's funny. There's a little bug on my screen. Last time we had gotten into a discussion, someone had asked, "How do I recognize my child on the other side?" So I don't know where you want to start, Kelvin, but we're definitely going to cover that today too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think when we last talked, somebody had asked that. So I said, hey, let's do another session. Let's talk just about that
Yeah,
issue. So we'll start talking about that, and then Sam and I will talk a little bit about
meditation.
meditation in the context of how we can connect with our loved ones on the other side more easily, right? So it's kind of all relates to everything in this group. And again, I always say this, but I mean it, and my heart goes out to everybody here in this group, especially because, the reason you're here is because you've lost a child. A child has died uh, before you, obviously, which is one of the, you know, things that we as parents, dread, you know. So anyway, just I always say that when I've spoken, I don't know how many times I've spoken with this group, Anne Marie, but it's been 4 or 5 times or something. Yeah.
Many times.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And by the way, Anne Marie, thank you, Anne Marie, not only
Yeah.
for inviting us to the group, but Anne Marie, look on the back and the rear cover of these two of my books. This is two of the books. You'll see Anne Marie's comment on the back on the rear cover. She's got her little one of the two comments on each of those books. This is my first book, Overcoming the Fear of Death. But let's talk about how we can recognize. Well, let's start first by who is the, or what is the, what are we talking about recognizing? Let's talk about that first, and then we'll get into the how and the different ways. But what we're talking about is our dead loved ones. In your case, is our children, and maybe you've had other, loved ones who have died besides your children too. But we're talking about a mind, a soul, a spirit, a consciousness. That I use all of those words interchangeably. Sometimes you'll hear me use the word mind a lot because I work across many, many cultures and many countries, 68 countries so far on Zoom. And, it's not that I have a huge travel budget. It's that thank you to video conferencing and streaming and stuff, right? But as a result, I try to use English that's easy for people to understand because sometimes English is their second, third, fourth language. Sometimes I'm talking to people. So I use the word, you'll hear me use the word mind a lot. But when I'm using the word mind or in my writing, in my books, you'll see that word a lot. I'm not talking about our little mind. I'm not talking about just the mind that's here talking to you and looking at a laptop screen on Zoom and so forth. Or I'm not just talking about the mind that we use to drive a car down the street. I'm talking about that plus, the vastness of our human mind. All of that is our mind. So if you're more comfortable using the word consciousness or awareness or soul or spirit, they're all interchangeable as far as I'm concerned. But you hear me use simple English for that reason, I said. So when our loved one dies biologically, again, technically, nobody ever dies. Everybody still exists. But our biology, our biological body will die, obviously. And when that has happened, then they will continue to exist on the other side. But I use a phrase to describe what we're talking about here, in addition to using the, obviously words like I said, soul, spirit, consciousness. I use a phrase, I call it an identifiable energy pattern. So because we're a mind, we're energy. We're not a physical biological thing anymore, obviously. So if we're energy and light or energy, we also have this added feature that I call identifiable energy pattern. So you recognize your loved one. And some of you may have had visitations from your loved ones already and so forth, or signs from them, etc. How do you know? You know because there is an identifiable something about that communication or that sign or something that is recognizable to you as somebody who obviously knew your child before they tragically died. So that something I sometimes also refer to in just kind of regular plain English as a personality. We have personality types, right? And sometimes if your child, for example, was a little bit of a prankster or a little bit of a, had a, that kind of side to him or her, sense of humorish kind of thing, that will continue and you'll know that it's them because of that. That's how they'll show up in the way they communicate with you. Or if they're not, or if they're more this way or that way, pick any kind of personality trait. That's what I've noticed in myself and in my communications. Those of you who know me, I've been communicating with the other side since 1986, so a long time. And it's recognizable. And a friend of mine communicated with me once, and he's a real prankster all the time. And he vibrated my phone when I was resting after. Some of you have taken my meditation class. We always rest after we meditate. And I was meditating with one of my students. It might have been one of you. I don't know. Can't remember. It was a couple of years ago. And about a month after my friend tragically died, I was meditating with one of my students, and I was resting afterwards, and my phone vibrated and went dut 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 dut, and it was perfect. It wasn't like random-ish. It wasn't like I had to. Oh, was that dut 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 dut? It was perfect, as if the electronic itself was wired to do that, and it's not. My iPhone cannot do that by itself. And then I said, Phil, is that you? And it went dut, 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 like right away. And so I'm sure it was my buddy Phil. I mean, that's what he used to, and he was teaching meditation also in his retirement years. He and I taught in the 1970s, and then we both had business careers. I continued teaching, and he didn't, but he went back to teaching after he retired several years before he died. So I'm sure that was Phil, teasing me, But that's a personality, that's an example. I'm using him as an example. It's a personality trait that's identifiable to that person, And that's exactly the kind of funny thing that he would do. So those types of things is stuff to look for when we're kind of, is that my son? Is that my daughter? Or is that my mother? Or is that, whatever. There are identifiable personality traits, and you guys know the people better than anybody else, obviously, and you'll be able to tell. That's one of the ways to tell. We'll talk about other things too, but yeah, in this book in particular, this is my third book, my most recent book, published last year, 2023. And it's about my past lives. So my past lives my memories reach back 6,000 years, a couple of dozen lifetimes. And there's somebody here in the room with us right now who I talk about in this book, who I remember from other lifetimes. And it's my daughter, this lifetime, Sam Chin, who we've had a couple of different relationships together. Sam, you want to tell the story about, what happened when I called you and you were at when you were a student at San Francisco State, that whole that thing about
The
how we used to call each other by
what we
mistake.
call each other. Yeah,
Yeah.
we often will slip up in conversation when we're talking about one another. He'll call me his sister. I call him my brother. And I'm like, oh, I mean my dad. And those kinds of things just slip up. We never had kind of any running jokes about saying that to one another. It just slips out.
Right.
Yeah.
And we didn't even know that the other one was doing it until
Hmm.
I was living in Austin, Texas at the time, working for some legal services company, and Sam was a dance major at San Francisco State. So I used to fly in from wherever I was living at the time. It was North Carolina, Washington, D.C., Austin, Texas. I think you were, I would fly in and see you, whether you were in high school dancing or in, she went to a performing arts high school in Los Angeles, or at San Francisco State. I would always fly in. I never missed any of her performances. And so I was about to call her to talk about something about my trip to go see her. But right before that, I was talking to some lawyer or somebody, and we were talking about our kids on the phone or something, and he was telling me, or he or she was telling me about their kids, and I said, "Oh yeah, I have a daughter." Yeah, I said no, I didn't say that. I said, "Oh yeah, my sister goes to San Francisco. I mean, my daughter goes to San Francisco State." That's the kind of trip up I was doing for years. Never talked to her about it. Never told Sam. And so then my next phone call was to Sam. So I just said that. I don't know why, because next phone call I dialed her to talk about coming to see her in a performance. And I mentioned that, and that's when she said what she just said. That's when she said, "Oh, Daddy, I didn't tell you, but I've been calling you my brother by mistake." And so sometime after that, so this story is in the longer version of this story is in this book. But sometime after that, I realized she was my sister um, in a lifetime that I had when I was born in 1712 and died in 1786. In that lifetime, she was my older sister in that lifetime. And her name in that so I had this memory of her that being my sister then. And we were very, very close. And she was about 3-4 years older than I was then. And her name in that lifetime was Wilhelmine. So Wilhelmine was her name in that lifetime 250 years ago. And you want to tell the story, Sam, about,
Yeah,
the
the
agency?
why that syncs up. Yeah. So the first modeling agency that I signed to is Wilhelmina Models. So I got signed in 2019, and I think you recalled this lifetime following that. So it was easy for us to make that kind of sync up with it.
Yeah, yeah. And you sent your stuff out to a whole bunch of different
Hmm.
agencies, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of how it goes when you're submitting yourself, you send your information out to tons of agencies. And Wilhelmina was the only one that actually ended up getting back to me. And I had done the same agencies, I want to say like four times, and you spread it out with a few months in between or so. And Wilhelmina was the first and only one to ever get back to me on the fourth try. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we think, I don't know this for sure. I haven't had any direct communication about this, but I think that we think that somebody whispered to somebody at Wilhelmina, said, "Open up that girl's mail, sign her," because um, I don't know if I met any of you at the IONS conference that I spoke at in 2019, the International Association for Near-Death Studies. It was held in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania. I'm actually in Pennsylvania right now. Not, I'm only about 45 minutes or an hour from King of Prussia, where I spoke a number of times at that conference. It was the first time I'd ever spoken at their conference in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania. And again, if you read this book, you'll see that I had a memory of being a king of Prussia. I didn't know which one. I had a memory of being a king of Prussia since 1970. 8, I had this memory, but I didn't know which one until 2015 or something like that. It's in the book, the actual date. I figured it out. But see how many decades passed, and then many more years passed, and then I figured out that in that lifetime, Sam was my older sister. So these relationships, that's another point I wanted to weave into our discussion here with you and your children who are on the other side. These relationships can continue, and you can continue and have other relationships, whether they continue, like in a future life, whether they continue being your son and or your daughter, or you have another relationship like sister or brother, like my daughter here, Sam and I have. We also have lifetimes where she was my daughter and I was her father in another lifetime as well. I talk about in the book. So we continue these kind of soul group, soul family relationships. We tend to do that. Why? Because we like hanging out with certain people, certain souls, and you can repeat those. Repeat the relationship. The relationship be slightly different and have a different role and so forth, but still be together is the point. Still have the souls being together in a future lifetime. So, and my son as well. Sammy has a brother, an older brother, Jesse, and I talk about him in my book too. And he and I were together in the 1800s. And again, another example for him of him in this. There's a section about the last half of the book is about personality traits. So the first half of the book is stories about how these memories kind of came up and what I was going through at the very moment that these memories would pop into my consciousness or awareness. But about the last half of the book is about these personality traits that we're talking about that you can identify your loved ones by perceiving. In my son's case, we in the family all know his personality so well. He's a very loving person, but can be very opinionated, you could say. I don't know, Sam, you can reframe if you want, however. But he can be very opinionated about certain things and sometimes a little bit critical, a little bit too self-critical, I would say, to the point where he can get a little depressed about himself and kind of be critical of others, in particular me at times. That has happened. Now we have a very good, close, loving relationship. I call him my special boy, and we love each other and so forth. But there is a unique personality trait to both of my children that's uniquely identifiable by me as their father. Okay? And I'm sure those of you who have children now who are still alive, as well as your child or children who have, on the other side, know exactly what I'm talking about. And they're uniquely different from each other too. They're not always the same, the kids. And my two kids are very, very different. But there's a story, and I'll tell you the story that will elucidate what I'm talking about, specifically about a personality trait. I'll use this as an illustrative for you guys. About my son in the 1800s. Because in the 1800s, there were cameras. I can't remember, it was 1850 or something like that. The first cameras came over from Europe, I think from France or something, where their camera was invented, something like that. So in the mid 1800s to the late, since then to present, photographs. So there are photographs of us and newspapers, and that's how people communicated a lot back then. There were no radios or anything like that. So it was newspaper, it was all written. So there are written stories in newspaper articles and journals and so forth, specifically about my son and how how he looked, how he thought. He's a very, very bright. They talk about how sharp his eyes were and how sharp and bright a mind he had, etc. In the 1800s when we were Native American. Okay, we were Lakota. Some people refer to them as Sioux. Sioux is actually a derogatory term, but so Lakota always refer to themselves as Lakota. And I was a shaman and a leader, tribal leader. But he said something. One of the last things he said before both of us got shot and killed by the blue coats, we call them, the government soldiers, etc., who had come to arrest me because I was a little bit of well, not a little bit. I was a defiant in terms of surrendering to the U.S. government, right? And they came to arrest me, and my son, his name was Crowfoot then. He was 14 or 15 years old, I think. He went to the door of the cabin where I was. They had us living on a reservation and so forth, and they came to arrest me because they were worried that I was going to lead an insurrection or try to. And he came to the door of the cabin, and I was being taken away by the soldiers, the armed soldiers, and he yelled at me and he said, you think you're such a great chief, and here you are, giving in to the bluecoats or something like that. He yelled something like that. So it was kind of a very cutting thing. It was a demeaning thing he was saying to his father, yelling, and it was one of the last things he ever said. But that's exactly my son's personality. He's not gonna hold back and tell you his opinion if he really feels strongly about something. And then we both get shot. But because somebody started shooting, I said, yeah, I'm not going. You're not taking me. And that was kind of, they say it woke me up. His words, they say, the way the journalists write the story, they say, woke me up. And then I said, no, I'm not going. And then people started shooting and we got killed. But that's an example of, and I'm sure each of you have those kinds of own little anecdotes in your own consciousness of your children on the other side. And that's how you'll recognize them, because their personality persists from lifetime to lifetime to lifetime, right? So that's one way to recognize your children when they visit you, or when you die and you're on the other side, you will recognize them. Another is they can visually change their look. If you've ever, I don't know if any of you have had any visual images of your children, either in dreams or even in waking state. I know people, I have clients who've had visitations, parents who've had visitations from their children in waking state, and you can feel their touch is kind of unique. Maybe the way they hug you, you feel of course, their energy body. They don't have a biological body, as we said, but their energy body, you can feel that, and it's their energy and so forth. Or in some cases, they can show you a kind of an energy look or face or whatever that would indicate that is your child, or that is your loved one, that it's recognizable to you. Sammy, do you want to share any of the visits that you've had in that regard?
Yeah. Something that came to mind for me when you said that is, and the time that I told you, much later in my life, I've had a habit of having experiences up until probably I was like 20 or so, where I just didn't tell you about them. I don't know why, but one of them was when I think I was 4, maybe 5, like very, very early on, where it's a part of the memories that I would think of like as my first memories that I can recall, when I saw your mom and your dad in our bedroom, because I was still sleeping in the same bed with you and mom at that time. And for me, it's a sense of knowingness, which touches on the meditation, which we'll talk about, is that feeling where you like I as much as I know that I'm sitting in this room right now, when you see this energy light body and you just know who it is. And I was, maybe 4 or 5, and I was the middle of the night and I sat up and there's a window behind our bed. So the moonlight is coming in through the slats. And on the other side of the room, I see these almost identical light figures. They didn't have any hair. They were just, the shape silhouette kind of people. And there was a height difference. And they looked nothing like my grandparents, but I immediately was like, oh, that's grandma and grandpa. Um, so that's the only visual experience that I've had so far. But in the same theme of that knowingness, I was sitting in on a meditation class of yours once, and in the group meditation, I was laying in my room, and at some point I heard outside of my body just say, "Hey, Sammy," and it jolted me out. It was, all meditation experiences are different, but the one I was having at that time was that I felt like I was pretty kind of deep under, very, very still aware of my body, not fully asleep, but very kind of dropped in. So I opened my eyes. I think I was on the phone. I had called into the meeting, so I didn't see, I wasn't on Zoom, physical Zoom. Um, but nothing followed up after that. And it was a woman's voice. My door was closed, and it wasn't like my mom's voice. And the immediate thought that I had was, oh, that's grandma, my dad's mom, who I never met. I don't know what she sounds like, or not. But it's oftentimes that first thought that comes to your head. And sometimes, I'm not investigating it either, trying to, um, yeah, really figure it out. It's just that kind of first gut hit that you get and the thought that you have, um, and becoming comfortable with that where you don't question yourself about it. Um, those are the main experiences that come to mind for me.
What did
Yeah.
didn't you see Shogun, my dog, also in that
Yes,
scene?
in that same evening, it was Shogun and Eloise, and they were like sitting on the foot of the bed. Eloise was a cat, our cat, who I think we put her down when I was really young as well. But they had, dog cat light bodies, um, and it was very brief, and it didn't scare me either. I think that was a big thing because as a kid, if you wake up and there's like random people in the room, that's kind of freaky. Um, but I felt a great sense of comfort and familiarity, and they were nothing really like the height that they were. Grandpa was what, maybe like 5'9", 5'8",
5'6".
5'6", and
Yeah,
your mom was 5 foot.
5'0".
These light bodies were, I don't know, maybe like 6 foot and 5'9". So completely different, but I just knew. And yeah, I had never met your mom. I'd only known stories of her, and my memories with grandpa were pretty few as well. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
My mom died 12 years before you were born, and then
Hmm.
my dog died 4 years before you were born. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, and I've had a lot of friends and family members pass throughout my life, and having just, the conversation of past life memories and the possibility of connecting with the other side has just been a very normal part of language for me from my dad and from my mom. Um, I do remember when one of my aunts passed in 2018. She moved around a lot, but the last place that I had seen her was in Joshua Tree. This was Dee Dee. And I was very, very close with her. And in the following, like maybe couple of weeks or so, I was listening to music while I was driving, and I just had my music library on shuffle. And it went over to the next song, and it's this song that I didn't I had only listened to a couple times. It was on an album of um, that I liked other songs from, and it popped up. The name of the song is Joshua Tree. So I immediately knew that was something from her. And I've had experiences like that where so if something has energy involved in it, most of the time technology, because souls without bodies are just energy, that's an easy kind of uh frequency they can just catch a ride on. Um, there was another time when I was Google searching something. Um, you have this screenshotted, Dad.
Yeah, you
Um,
were searching an article about modeling.
yes, and it wasn't, so I was already on a separate page for modeling, and I went to click in the search window of that website, and a drop down pops down, and it's every name of the people that I am the closest to who have passed. Very specific names. So it's Henry, King, David,
Sam,
Holly, Sam, and
Bloom.
Bloom was
Mm.
on there, which is my aunt Dee Dee's last name. So I have never searched those names. I hadn't, recently searched them, had never been on that website before, and they were all individually on their own drop down.
Right.
So yeah, I've found a lot of synchronicities that happen with technology in that way because there is an energy current there, like I said, that can kind of be um you could like just catch a ride on it. um and another thing that I've experienced is seeing signs of engravings on the sidewalk or something like that, and that most of the time I think has to do with listening to myself in this way of having a relationship with myself in terms of making different decisions of I'm just going to turn down this street, or oh, I took longer to get ready to leave the house today and I'm running behind, and then you end up being somewhere where you see something where things feel very it's like I would have never seen this sign from a loved one if I hadn't made these other decisions prior to that, and that has a lot to do with just being in tune with yourself, um, and kind of letting go to decisions that happen and also being open to it while also not directly looking for it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are all the things that come to mind for me.
That's great, Sam. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, and to be crystal clear on what one of the examples I was using, a couple of examples I was using earlier, you may not. So we're talking about recognizing your dead loved ones, your child on the other side, but also what about in a future lifetime? So I talked about that, right, in those examples where they don't look like they did in this lifetime, yet you can still recognize them because of their personality. That's the thing. And that's what I've recognized in this young woman here, who's my beautiful young daughter this time. You know, there's a unique personality that goes along with each of us, and we travel with it from lifetime to lifetime. And so that's what you can look for. And there are examples, there's many documented cases of children dying at a very young age, let's say 2 or 3 years old, after having already gotten had a like a bicycle accident or something, or on a toy playing, where they have a scar on their arm or their leg or something, and then they tragically die from illness or accident, and then they come right back into the same family. There is a number of many case studies like this, but when they come back into the same family 9 months, a year, 2 years later, whatever, sometimes the child will have a birthmark on the arm or the leg or wherever that's exactly the same shape and location as the scar they had before they died. And then furthermore, you look at their personality, as we've been saying, and they like the same Disney movies. They don't like the same Disney movie. They like broccoli, they hate broccoli, or whatever it is. It's the same kind of personality that can come right back into the same family. That can happen. And of course, they may physically look very different, but the consciousness, the soul is the same. That's the thing. Yeah. Should we open to questions, Anne Marie, and then we can talk about meditation at the end, you know, whatever? People have questions about what we've been talking.
Yeah, definitely. Does anybody have any questions that they would like to ask Kelvin or Sam?
Any questions?
About meditation, about afterlife?
Deb has a question. Yeah.
Hey there. When I did a past life regression, Linda Backman did it for me, and she felt like that and my two sons, both the one who passed and the one who's still with us, were interplanetary souls, whereas my husband is an Earth soul. Can you just, again, did you have any of that in like when you look at your past lives? Did you where I haven't read your book yet, but I've pulled it up on Amazon already. I'll buy it. But have any of your past lives been non-Earth past
Yes.
lives?
Yes. Short answer, yes. Yeah, you'll read about it in the book. I don't have a lot of memories on other lifetimes on other planets, but I do have one that I talk about in there. I think that, again, I look at myself and I look at other people just in general of knowing how people are and how I am. I think we tend to go back to the same place for the most part. Generalization, okay? Because there's a certain familiarity here. We know what the gravity's like here and all this, like, oh, there's trees, other planets, have trees, whatever, oh, we got oceans here, other planets, they don't have oceans. I don't know if Dune is an actual planet, but it's an actual movie about it, planets, and, it's desert, no oceans. And the people who live on that planet Dune, I'm saying Dune because it's that, you've probably seen it. A second movie is out, Dune 2 is out, but that's a planet with no oceans. Yeah, it's all desert, and people, you talk to the inhabitants of that planet and go, oh yeah, we come from a planet where oceans, and they just can't believe it, So I think going back to a planet that is familiar, I think for the most part, probably my guess, if I had to guess, I'd say that most people keep coming back to Earth after having been here for whatever reason they chose to come in the first place. But yeah, I'm a risk taker to some degree, and I've gotten adjusted to other gravities and other civilizations and so forth. And I talk a little bit about one of them in the book. But yeah, so that makes sense what you said. I think that could very well be possible. Yeah. It's an interesting question. Yeah.
Very interesting.
I think there's lots of planets that are inhabited. I mean, people, there's a couple of things that I think when people say, oh, no, it's just planet Earth, whatever, we think of ourselves as the center of the universe. It's like, really? We're like a tiny speck on the outer rim of the Milky Way galaxy in a universe that scientists, astronomers know right now anyway, that there are billions and billions of galaxies. And how many planets are there in one galaxy? Billions of planets in the galaxy. And I don't even know what a billion times a billion times a billion is. It's just a crazy number. And people think, no, but it's just one planet and out of billions and times billions of possibilities where life exists. Really? Yeah, I think that it's quite, I would say, egocentric, let's just say. But just looking at the numbers, the odds are that there are other inhabited planets, so. And I've had memories, so whether you believe that or not doesn't matter. But the odds are that, yeah, there's a lot of possibilities out there in terms of other planets inhabited. Yeah.
So what are the chances of your child reincarnating before you get there.
Before you get to the other side and reincarnate with them. Yeah, is that what you're asking, Lorraine?
Yeah, like if they're already reincarnated, you said, a child could come right back a couple years later.
Sure.
So then,
So what's the odds? Who knows? It's less odds. Odds makes it sound like it's random. It's
right.
more choice. I think that's the more accurate way in my experience, and my experience with many of my clients who've had experiences on the other side, making choices before they come back in. I talk about one of my lifetimes, or one of my in-between lifetimes, in-between Earth lifetimes, remembering being on the other side. I talk about this in my third book here, where I talk about remembering why I came back in my 1919 to the 1940s lifetime before this one. And so it's a decision, it's a choice that we can make or we can not make. So I would say, Lorraine, on a practical level, and one of my personality traits, those of you who know me, is that I'm very practical the way I look at stuff, right? And I look at what's take a pragmatic, practical view. And my practical advice would be that if that's a concern, to communicate with your dead loved ones, say, hey, wait for me, because it's a choice that they're going to make. Now, they could choose to come back for some other reason, or who knows what, that's their choice, to come back before you are ready, before you die and are on the other side. You can come back together with them. But those are conversations that I encourage you all to have with your dead loved ones now, because they can hear you. Whether or not you have direct communication with them, and that that they can, because they're responding to you or not or whatever, that doesn't matter. They can hear you. They get the message. And so my recommendation was to communicate with them. In your case, Lorraine, say, hey, wait for me. Don't go back yet.
I'm not coming back.
Well, that's the other thing. You don't have to come back. It's a choice to come back.
Right.
And sometimes people will say to me, like, why do I've had such a tough life. I don't know, why would I come back? And so people got to realize that choice can be very subtle, and desire is a choice.
Tacos, naps, tacos, naps.
Right? Exactly. Like I have a student in New York, and her name's Tasha. I won't say her last name, but her name's Tasha. And I say, Tasha. She goes, why is this so crazy here? I said, Tasha, you've told me so many times how much you love soft serve ice cream. So I don't know. I'm not reading your mind by saying this, but it could be. You might have been on the other side going, I can have this fake soft serve ice cream made of light on the other side in heaven. But I really miss the taste of soft serve ice cream on a biological tongue, and then boom, that's the desire. That's what I'm saying. You gotta, that desire could have put her down the chute into a body, So you gotta be careful what you wish for. You know that phrase, be careful what you wish for because you might get it. Yeah. So, but no, nobody's gonna make you, Lorraine, come back. It's gonna be your choice.
Good.
Your choice. The other thing I point out to people, I say, has anybody, unfortunately, I'm not of that aristocratic class of people that, the 0.1% that exist on the planet Earth. I've never been part of that this lifetime for sure. But I hear that when you're on vacation for a really, really, really long time, you might get bored. And so it's kind of like being on vacation on the other side, because you don't have a biological body. You don't have to feed it. You don't have to clothe it. You don't have to have a job. You don't have to put a roof over. You don't have a biological body. So it's pretty much being on vacation. And you can
So what
think.
the heck do they do all day?
Exactly. You do
What do
whatever
you do?
you do whatever you want to do and you can be with whoever you want to be with, or not be with people who I don't want to be hanging out with those people. And you just, boom, you're just
Like,
traveling.
I can't picture my 92-year-old mom, over there having a good time. I don't know.
Well, here's the thing. First of all, she's not 92 years old on the other side, right? That's a biological thing, right? The soul doesn't have age, right? But she's her personality. So if she was cranky as
No.
a being, I don't know. I don't know your grandma, but your mom or your grandmother, whoever you're talking about. But however their personality is the same personality. So if they're kind of somebody who doesn't have a lot of fun, then they're kind of you're right. They're going to kind of be like that on the other side too. So,
No. Then
but
then she's having a good time over there.
yeah, but people will find souls will find a way to have a good time. And on the other side, it's much easier than here because of all the restrictions we have about you're not going to get sick on the other side. All of that stuff. You don't have to worry about going and get medical tests on the other side. All that biological stuff we don't have on the other side. So right away it's less stressful and it's kind of easier. That's why I use the phrase it's kind of like being on vacation. But like I said, some people get bored and they want to I don't want to feel like it's like being what getting drunk again. Well, you can't get drunk on the other side. Right? So your next thing you know, they're in a body and they're kind of going, oh, you mean I have to pay for this beer? I have to get a job? I forgot about that part because maybe they've been on the other side for 5,000 years or 1,500 years and then they forgot. Right? So anyway, yeah, other questions? Marlene, you have a question?
Have another question?
I thought Marlene unmute herself. I wasn't sure. Yeah, so you want to talk about the meditation and how Sammy and I teach meditation, right? I've been teaching it for 50 years. Sam's been meditating for how long now, Sam, you've been meditating?
25.
25 years she's been meditating.
Mm-hmm.
And so we teach the same meditation, we call it turning within. Some of you guys know my history. I was very anxious when I learned, 19 years old, 50 something years ago. And I learned TM, Transcendental Meditation. And I studied personally with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who taught the Beatles to meditate in 1967. I learned in 1970. And I was an international leader in his organization for about 10 years. And then his organization went on from different directions and did other things. And I thought, and I want to stay focused on teaching meditation. So I left the organization. So now I call what I teach turning within. We've also removed all the cultural kind of lifestyle cultural trappings from the teaching so that like I said earlier, we can teach across many, many cultures and religions and countries and so forth. So, I'm teaching in 68 countries now. So for that reason, I've removed all the cultural stuff and it just looks like I'm teaching you how to close your eyes. Sammy's teaching you how to close your eyes and do this very easy, simple technique that's almost effortless. It's very easy. No focusing, no clearing the mind of thoughts. It's not difficult to do at all. And you only have to do it for 10, 15 minutes each time. Right? Sammy, you want to talk a little bit about it?
Yeah. What would you like me to say about
I don't
what
know.
prompted about it?
How did you get into it and how's it helped you?
Yeah. I mean, my dad taught me when I was 4, and prior to that, he was teaching meditation classes in our living room when I was, 2 or 3. I just remember kind of coming and going as I wanted. I'd sit on his lap, meditate with him or whatever. And I don't like all of my memorable life, I've had meditation as the tool. And I didn't it took me until I was much older, like, maybe like 19, 20 or so when I was in college and talking to strangers on the bus or in Uber pools and Uber drivers and just really, complete strangers. Because I would meditate on the bus, I would meditate in Ubers, and then I would tell people, I'm just meditating, like I'm closing my eyes. I know that when the ride is over, I'm not going to sleep. So when I would open my eyes and they would start talking to me about meditation, and the top thing I would hear people would tell me is, meditation is so hard. I've always tried to clear my mind and it doesn't work. And being able to have these conversations of like, that's not all meditation is about. Really, that's when I started to understand that this light was going off within me when I would talk about meditation with people, and it was very exciting for me. Um, and I really realized, this is something that's special that can help so many people as much as it has helped me. And when I was younger, we moved a lot. We moved when I was 8, and then we moved when I was 12. And our move when I was 8 was from Los Angeles to a small town in Massachusetts. And on the way to school every day, I would have my breakfast, and it was either my mom or my dad would say, do you want to meditate? I'll keep track of the time. And it was usually a very short meditation because it wasn't a long ride. It was maybe 1 minute technique, few minutes rest. And it was just a part of my life, as much as eating breakfast is a part of my morning routine. And I just say, yeah, I'm going to do it. And being a new kid at that age was really hard for me, especially because of the I experienced a lot of bullying, more not outright, shove me in my locker and give me your lunch money kind of bullying, but more psychological torment from people. Popular girls kind of being really just mean, but in subtle ways that kind of shifted or were attempts at shifting of myself about my identity.
You were
Um,
at that point, it was third grade when we moved back east,
yeah,
right?
yeah, it was third grade, and I think I want to say the apparent bullying really started in fourth grade and went through seventh for as long as we were there. Um, I mean, it took me a while, and with the help of my parents to help talk me through it, to understand that it was mostly because of the comfort that I had with myself in terms of how I expressed myself. I wore really crazy outfits all the time. That's how I've been since I was little. And when I think it was when I was 2, I told my parents like, enough is enough. I'm taking the reins on this. So they allowed me to express myself, and that was a very normal thing for me. And bringing that as like a Los Angeles girl into a very small town where kind of everybody is copy and pasting personal style, I stuck out like a sore thumb for that reason. And as much as I knew that it kind of made me uncomfortable to be sticking out in that way, I also didn't want to not express myself in that way. And it took me until much later in life to realize that that has a lot to do with the meditation that I had been doing all up until that point. And every day on my way to school, kind of knowing that something might happen to me that day from, on a social standpoint. Um, just building that, the meditation helped me build this foundation of being confident in myself and holding lots of different emotions at one time, whether that's, fear of being criticized or nervous, while also holding the importance of expressing myself, which I think is a thing that happens throughout life all the time, where we have multiple conflicting emotions living within us at one time. And I think fear is one of those. Fear of, a whole list of things. Um, but I wouldn't call myself a fearless person. I just am able to move through life while fear is also very much present. And acknowledging that I might be nervous about something or have some fears about something, but what's more important to me is pushing myself out of my comfort zone or expressing myself or being true to myself and how I communicate myself with people. And that showed up a lot, especially when I was at that age. And then when we moved back to Los Angeles, I wasn't necessarily bullied, but it became much more of I was shown how people were identifying me to myself because I'm half Chinese and half Caucasian, when we lived in Massachusetts, everybody was like, "You're the Chinese girl." But okay, like I always identify myself as being mixed, and you can call me whatever you want. And then when we moved back to Los Angeles, um, I was told that I was one of the white kids in the class. And I was like, okay, this is some weird parallel thing that people want to put labels on me, but that doesn't um, shake how I identify myself. And I think just that accumulation of having the meditation as this undercurrent of staying connected with myself, processing things that are going on, processing, being at a very malleable age, like how much am I going to listen to people in what their perception of me is versus how much is my perception of myself more important. Um, and yeah, it's helped me through so many stressful situations throughout high school and throughout college. In college, I was a dance major and I worked 2 to 3 jobs. So I had on average 13-hour days from being out of the house. And not only was that just, mentally, emotionally strenuous, but when I was in the dance program, being one of the taller girls, there's always not always, but most often there's a shortage of men in dance programs. So if we were ever working on partnering and lifting, because I'm 5'8", they would cast me to learn all the male parts. So I'm learning how to lift, people who are like 130 pounds, like throughout a performance and everything. And throughout having 13-hour days of being in class, working at restaurants, working at the library, lifting people throughout the day, I would fit in my meditation on the bus, or I would sit outside my job, like on a bench or something like that in the library. And it just helped me coast through that time with a lot more ease because I didn't have time to take a nap. But I needed some type of regularity with having a reset with myself. And sometimes I had 15 minutes and sometimes I just had 5. And always having that flexibility and always knowing that, because that's just what I was taught, was really, really helpful. Um, it's helped me, the meditation has helped me with grief, grieving people who I've lost suddenly, grieving people who are still alive, who, you grow apart from, grieving different versions of myself where I'm morphing out of behavioral patterns, or having to take a really um, honest look at how my behavioral patterns affect the way that I interact with people in my life, or the way that I interact with my experience of life. And a lot of the processing and balancing out of those high intensity emotions definitely happens during my meditation. And specifically in those painful times of life, my meditation might just be crying, and knowing that that's a normal option of experiences is so helpful to create that balance in my life, especially with how busy life has been for me and continues to be. It ensures that I am also making enough time and space for myself and that relationship with myself, and allowing my emotions to pass through me and to be processed, because they can't always do that when you're at work. But if I go and I take a break or I'm meditating after my day of work and I can just really let it pass through me and move out, I
Yeah,
think it helps me get through the difficult periods of life a lot faster, because I'm making space versus trying to just push off what I'm feeling for the sake of trying to make myself feel okay. Um,
yeah,
yeah, and yeah,
that's great. Thank you for sharing that, honey. Um,
yeah.
so I want to segue a little bit, so that all those benefits that Sam talked about are transferable to us as parents in this group. And those of you who have lost children obviously have gone through various moments of degrees of anxiety that Sam talked about, how the meditation can help reduce that. And those moments those situations those of anxiety and depression and all the various emotions are normal and natural. The grieving process is varied. Everybody grieves differently. At the same time, when we want to communicate as an objective with our dead loved ones, that can sometimes be a hindrance, a barrier. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about how meditation can improve the likelihood. There's no guarantees that we can communicate with our dead loved ones, but the meditation in the way that we teach it, it expands our conscious capacity of experience. So it's in addition to reducing our anxiety and stress, as Sam has discussed, it also increases our capacity of our consciousness, of our conscious experience. Well, what does that do? That increases our frequency, our vibratory frequency, you could say, so that we can start to vibrate or have a frequency of our energy system, that's what we are as energy, as we've talked about earlier, increase that frequency or change our frequency so that it's in more alignment with the frequency that exists in heaven. We'll call it just heaven or the afterlife, right? Because that's why, where is heaven? It's right here. It's not up in the sky. I mean, people just figuratively use that image, up in the sky. It's right here. It's right here, except we can't see it. It's right here. Our loved ones, our dead loved ones are in and amongst us. We just can't see them. Why? Because it's like a dog. A dog can, a dog whistle is, a dog can hear certain things that humans can't hear. And there are animals, there are many, many different animals who have a range of eyesight, and our human eyesight's like this, and there are animals who have range of eyesight that's like this, and they can see things that we can't see. Well, that's what we're talking about here. So through the meditation process, expanding our conscious capacity for our experience increases our ability to connect with our dead loved ones on the other side as well. So that's the other thing. And I got a very, very touching, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I got a very, very touching message from a mother whose daughter died very young. She learned, I taught her to meditate, and her objective was to connect with her daughter. And I said, well, there's no guarantees. We don't know, because there's so many factors involved, right? Including her daughter, to Lorraine's point, is her daughter still on the other side, or is she, incarnated into another body or not? But so there's lots of unknowns. But she said, my reason for learning the turning within form of meditation, because she had done other forms of meditation before, was to expand my ability to connect with my young daughter, who unexpectedly transitioned to spirit 6.5 months before my first meditation class with Kelvin. It's been a year since Kelvin and I had our first meeting, and I've dedicated myself to the practice, meditating twice a day, every day. The method and my efforts have paid off. My connection with my daughter is strong and something I never thought possible. I tell every parent I know with a child in spirit to learn. So, and she goes on and on, but it has that effect. It can have that effect. It has the effect of expanding your conscious capacity for sure. And can that help and assist in connecting with our dead loved ones? Absolutely. Yeah. Anne Marie, do you want to comment on that? I know you've taken the class, and some of the others have here too.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I've heard that before from others who have taken your meditation class, that was the main reason they wanted to expand themselves and increase their frequency so that they could have more clarity with spirit on the other side, namely their children. I will say that I heard my son very early on, after he passed, but now it's with such clarity. It's clear. I know, and like Sam said, it's a knowingness. You just know who they are. You just have a knowingness that it's my mom, it's my son, my daughter. And not my daughter, my son, yeah, maybe my son was my daughter, right? Maybe is that why he said that? But anyways, it has increased how easily that I can communicate now that I do the meditation twice a day. And I do want to say also, for health reasons, that was my main reason for wanting to meditate. It was no coincidence that I saw Kelvin on with Brian Smith. It just kind of popped up on my computer. And I was listening. And at that time, I think I was in the hospital when I connected with you. And I did it because of health reasons. Kelvin had talked about blood pressure and cortisol and becoming healthier. And I had a very strange rare disease that I was determined to get a hold of and control. And so that was a lot of my purpose also for doing the meditation. And I noticed that immediately if I get stressed, I will start to have a flare up of this disease. And I just stop what I'm doing and I meditate, even if it's sometimes 3 or 4 times a day, just to keep everything balanced. But yes, if you definitely want to communicate with your children and become more balanced, I would definitely do the technique. I can't say enough about it for what it's done for me too.
Amelia is asking in the chat box some questions there,
Carmen, can you?
I would say, first of all, Amelia and everybody, the class it's a 4-day class. I'm going to teach you something that's not meditation before we end this session. I'm going to teach everybody something, but that I can teach you in like a minute. But the meditation that we teach is a 4-day class, and it's an hour the first day and a couple hours each of the other days. And it's 3 days in a row, and the 4th class is a couple weeks later. That's the general structure of the class. And you can just go to turningwithin.org. We teach it under my nonprofit. Turningwithin.org is the website. Sam has her own website, which she teaches under the same nonprofit as I do, but she has her own website. It's called meditationwithsam.com. meditationwithsam.com.
And I can post those in the group.
Yeah, you can put that in the group when you send this out.
Yeah.
But Amelia, so that's the actual class, and then we give lifetime follow-up to people forever. And in another 30 years, when I'm on the other side, Sam will continue in my footsteps. But she's already got a great start teaching already. But let me teach you something real quick right now. So this is not meditation, but Amelia was asking, is there something, that can help with she said it in the chat room here, can you help teach us something to help with our grief brains? The grieving can be so intense sometimes. And I know because my mom died when she was very young. And I was young. I was 29, 30 years old or something. And my mom died, she was 50. And it's very, very difficult when you're in an intense state of grief. So this technique that I'm going to teach you can do anytime. Eyes open, eyes closed, standing, sitting, lying down. Public place, private place, doesn't matter. Okay, it's very, very, very practical. And simply what you do, I call it the belly button technique. You just take your hand, you put it on your tummy. Put your hand in your tummy on your belly button. Just rest it there. And it doesn't matter which hand. You just rest one of your hands on your belly button. And you just take some slow, deep breaths. That's it. That's all it is. Slow, deep breaths. Hand in the belly button, slow, deep breaths. So while you're doing it now, I'll explain to you why it works. Slow, deep breaths. So don't hyperventilate. Don't breathe fast. Don't count your breaths. Just breathe normally, but deep breaths, slow, deep breaths. And you can take 3, 4, 6, 10 deep breaths. That's it. Doesn't matter how many. You don't have to count. But so the reason it works is because if you're having an intense grief burst, they call in grieving, they call it a grief burst, or an intense or a panic attack or an anxiety moment, what's going on in your head? This was going on, right? Your mind's going, la, 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 la. You know, you have what I call washing machine spin cycle mind, you know. And what's the worst thing to do to try to stop that? Is to try to stop it by mentally trying to stop it. Because what if you've all tried to do that, I'm sure, and what does it do? It does nothing. It makes it worse. If I told you to stop thinking about, don't think about hippopotamus, now you can't stop thinking about hippopotamus. Like, why Kelvin say hippopotamus? Now you think it's too late. You're thinking about it. So you cannot control your mind to do what it's normally naturally going to do anyway, is the point. So what happens when you do this belly button technique, you put your hand in your tummy, where does your mind go? It automatically goes to your tummy because you just put your hand in your belly button. So you don't have to control your mind to do that. You do something with your body, you put your hand in your tummy, your mind goes to your tummy automatically, gets out of whatever you're thinking. Now, what's the slow, deep breaths do? Taking slow, deep breaths, what does that do? That stimulates what's called the vagus nerve. You can Google it later, VAGUS. The vagus nerve is the longest nerve in the body, in the human nervous system, in the human body. It goes from the base of the brainstem, goes to all your organs, your lung, your heart, your stomach, your throat, your small intestine, your kidney, your liver. It goes everywhere. And when you take slow, deep breaths, it stimulates the vagus nerve, which calms everything down. That's what the slow, deep breath is. So when you do that, it just calms everything down. It's not a meditation technique, and it does not have the long-term effects that the meditation technique that we teach does, but it has an immediate effect. It's immediate, but temporary. It's not permanent. It's temporary, but immediate. So it's a good thing to do. I have people doing it. I have lawyers doing it, having a panic attack in a conference room in a high rise during a partnership meeting or something. And nobody knows what you're doing. You put your hand in your tummy, take it slow. Your eyes can be open. It doesn't matter, right? So lying down, going to bed at night helps people go to sleep at night. You can do it any place, public place, private place. I have people doing it sitting at traffic lights, sitting in their car doing it, eyes open. Okay? Good. Any other questions before we go? You're welcome, Amelia. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome,
Any
Lorraine.
questions?
I'll tell you a quick story about the belly button technique. So one of my students contacted me, and it was because of the time zone. I live in Los Angeles. The time zone, it was very late for him. And he said, "Are you up?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Can I call you?" And I said, "Yeah." So I taught him this. He was having a panic attack. And I taught him this. And the next day, I thought he was at his house. And the next day, he texted me. He said, "I didn't tell you where I was last night. Last night when I called you, I was sitting in my car in the parking lot outside the emergency room in the hospital in my city. And I was just about to check myself in. But I figured I'd call, text Kelvin, see he was up. And he called me. It calmed him down. He said he went home. He slept like a baby, saved him an emergency room visit." So it's very simple, but it works. Okay, good.
Amelia says, best way to connect to our kids, please.
Sammy, you got to go?
I do.
Yeah. Why don't you say bye,
Yeah.
and then I'll take some
Thank
more
you
questions.
so much, everyone. It was so
Bye,
nice to meet
Sam.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me here.
Thank
Thank
you
you
Sam,
for
I have
sharing
to tell
everything.
you really quick, when you commented that about Joshua Tree, it was like I could totally visualize everything you were saying. My husband and I do volunteer ranger work in Big Bear and in Joshua Tree.
Mhm.
And the most connections and the weirdest things I have ever felt, from Indians to miners to everything, has been in Joshua Tree.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm out there and I'll hear things here, and I don't mention anything to the rest of the crew because I'm like, they're going to think nuts. And when you started saying all that, it just like gave me a visual of all the areas out there where I've heard things or seen weird images, and it was like, wow, what a connection.
Yeah. 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 I do find with myself, like some things, you know, you don't need to share with everyone.
Exactly.
Or, you know, it doesn't always have to be that like they don't share the same belief system, but like
Mhm.
I didn't share a past life memory of mine with my dad that for 13 years because I just thought it was part of this lifetime.
Yep. Yep.
Um, you know, it's those things that we kind of hold closer to ourselves that can be just as special whether we share them
Yep.
or not.
Yep.
Because it's that sense of like it kind of hits a ping within your emotions, which then triggers this kind of like feeling in your body where you just feel very you just know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
sometimes you don't know how to describe that to people. So you just kind
Exactly.
of let it marinate, and that's the
Yep.
better option.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
funny you saying that because we were out there one day working, and um I don't even know what I started thinking about like all the miners and the Indians that were in that area, and I thought, wow, I wonder where they were at. I wonder if they were near where I was standing. And all of a sudden I looked down and there was a piece of an old mining tool like right between my legs, right between my
Wow.
feet. And it was like, wow, like Joshua Tree is a highly hiked area. And for me to find that was just crazy.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, okay, this is my answer. This is where they obviously were at.
Yeah. Yeah. And even for you to have that thought of the question at that
Yeah,
moment
of
is
where
that.
they were at. And
Mhm.
there, when I looked down, there was a piece of an old mining tool. And as a matter of fact, I have it here at home. I'll have to share it with you guys.
Yeah.
It's an
Yeah.
old saw, piece of a saw, and I have it here.
Wow.
Yeah, so
Wow.
it's
Well,
interesting.
yeah. Yeah.
Olga and I are both in California.
Oh, great. Yeah. I'm in Los Angeles still.
Oh,
So,
my
yeah.
son lives a block, 2 blocks away from the Hollywood sign.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
very
Well, I
familiar.
saw your comment, Amelia. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you. That was a great question. We do need stuff for our grieving brains.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll let you answer that question in length and everything. But thank you everyone again for having me. All the questions, all the sharing. Yeah.
Thanks for joining
Yeah.
All
us.
right. I'll see you
Thank
next
you for
time.
coming. It was
You guys
nice to
can
Thank
meet
you.
you.
feel free to reach out to Sam on her website
Yeah.
if you
Mhm.
to. Yeah, you
Yeah,
reach.
even if it's just a question or an experience, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to mean that you want to learn to meditate, you know. I'm
Right.
always here for that. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Wonderful.
All right. Have a good one, everybody.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Sam.
Very
Thank
much.
you. Bye.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
So one thing that before I answer the question, Sammy was talking about a story that's in this book. This is my first book. And what she was referring to very briefly was on page 104. I'm not going to read you the story, but it's on page 104 if you have this book already. And it's called Walking in a Dust Storm. And it's a story about her that she thought it was from this lifetime, and it wasn't. When you read the story, you'll see what I mean. And she didn't tell her mom and me for 13 years about this experience because she assumed that it happened in this lifetime, and there's no way that it did. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. You can check out that story in that book, Walking in a Dust Storm. That's what she was talking about. So what was the question that somebody had?
She said best way to communicate with our kids, please.
Best way, my recommendation is to, you go to sleep at night and you're lying there, you brushed your teeth, you got your jammies on, the lights are off, and you're just literally lying there, going to sleep, ready to go to sleep, but you're not asleep yet. You're just lying there. You just laid down right at the beginning. My recommendation is at that point, you just kind of say that you could say it out loud. You could just think it in your mind. You don't have to speak them. Sometimes people feel more comfortable speaking out loud. to their dead loved ones. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But their energy, they don't have ears. They're not hearing with eardrums, obviously. They don't have a biological body. So it's their consciousness that's picking up on your conscious thoughts. So you could just lie there and either say or think, I'd love to, please come visit me tonight in my, when I'm sleeping, or something, some variation of that. Basically express a desire that be open and receive them and so forth in your sleeping and dreaming. Because when you're sleeping and dreaming, we all are more open, right? When we're sleeping and dreaming, our conscious awareness is just more open. It just is. And so that would be my number one recommendation, is to do that. And then I guess secondarily is just to do stuff that balances you as much as possible. So meditation is a component of that, but it's not the only thing. It's, are you eating well? Are you eating healthy? Not starving yourself. Are you getting out and moving? And physically moving. I'm not saying you got to get on a treadmill and you don't have to go join the, train for the marathon. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about moving, just getting out, moving, walking, moving the body physically. So this all falls into the category of balance. The more balanced we are, the more we're going to increase the likelihood that we're going to be able to communicate with our dead loved ones. It's all about balance. If we're really, really imbalanced, that's not going to be, it's just not, if you're exhausted, whatever, that's just another barrier. It's not a 100% barrier, because Sam didn't get into it, but she's had experiences communicating with the other side where she's had, I think she's okay with me saying this, with blow up arguments with her boyfriend, like right before, and then she's lying down crying, and then she's had experience. So it's not, these things are not barriers, but they tend to be inhibitors, feeling exhausted, being incredibly upset, et cetera, et cetera. But being incredibly upset and grieving over somebody, you never want to squelch that. Okay, that's not what I'm talking about. Any kind of stuff that's going to help balance us, that's the thing. In fact, crying, when I cried, some of you guys take my meditation class, I tell the story when my mom died, I used just to cry during my meditation, and Sammy referenced something like that when she was talking about her experience with meditation. That can happen. And it's a releasing. And we never fight this stuff. No. Grieving of any form needs to not be resisted, needs to be allowed to happen. And all of those things tend to increase our ability to connect with our dead loved ones, right? The more connected we are within ourselves, the more connected we are going to be able to connect outside of ourselves with the universe around us, whether the universe we're talking about is our dead loved ones or living loved ones here on earth connected, right? So it all stems from inside us. The more connected we are within, then the more connected we can be outside. Does that help?
That makes sense.
Yeah. Anything else before we go?
Anything else?
I have a question. Am I on mute?
Nope. We can hear you, Marlene. We can
This
hear
is
you.
my third device. I'm having technical difficulties tonight.
That's
So
okay.
anyway, I was wondering, what about children that like miscarriages
Yeah.
and things like that,
Mhm.
or abortions without getting into any legal,
Yep. Yep.
as far as soul planning, how does that work?
Well, what do you mean soul planning? First of all, they have a soul could have been in any of those fetuses at any stage. So a soul could have been in there, but they're not connected to the body. Obviously, the body dies, the soul continues, right?
Right.
So what do
Right.
you mean by soul planning? What do you mean?
Well, no, I did actually, it doesn't have anything to do with soul planning, but I was just wondering, do those children just leave, go back and
Yeah.
choose their parents and things
Sure.
like that?
Yeah, they're just, the soul continues regardless of what the body does, regardless of the functioning of the body, whether the body dies in a miscarriage, where the body dies at childbirth, where the body dies, 5 minutes after birth, where the body dies 5 years or 50 years later. Doesn't matter. The soul continues. And the issue, I think, that's difficult to wrap our minds around is the fact that the souls are ageless. The body is aging. The body is not developed because it's in this case, a fetus or whatever, right? Or a 2-year-old or a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old. So yeah, the body is developing, but the soul is ageless. Now, does the mind that's incarnated into a 2-year-old body learn stuff between 2 years old and 10 years old? Yes. Does it learn how to walk and so forth? Does that mind? Yes. So, but the soul is more what I'm talking about, the personality. When I talk about personality, that's closer to what we're talking about. We're talking about soul, okay? And so in your question, in your case, where there's an abortion or a miscarriage or whatever, yeah, that soul just is in heaven, it's on the other side, and can choose to come back or not, just like any other soul can. So it just goes kind of back in line, so to speak, figuratively speaking. So has that opportunity again to come back in or not. And yeah, I've had experiences with that.
Oh,
In this lifetime, I mean. Yeah, where I've miscarriages and, birth, some of my relatives and so forth. And it's clear to me, maybe not it's clear to them, but clear to me that that soul that miscarried came back in to another body. Now, the other thing is, you got some of the bodies are damaged. Some of the bodies are damaged, not working properly. That's what I mean by damaged. Certain DNA things get a little mixed up and so forth, because while birth and birthing and creating a human body is just an incredibly magical thing and so incredibly complicated, we forget how incredibly complicated it is and how easy it is for some stuff to go wrong. And so, a miscarriage or something like that, yeah, that's what's going on there. Something's really not right, and then it doesn't create a biological form that obviously survives. That's what a miscarriage is, right? So, yeah,
thank you.
yeah, you're welcome.
Could it be that sometimes the soul just changes its mind?
Oh, that can happen too.
Oh,
Decides, I'm out of here.
Yeah, the soul can do that.
oh.
We're gonna change your mind anytime. Sure.
What about like with mental illnesses? I know things can happen at birth that that maybe isn't in your soul plan. But what about like, did people choose to actually come and have like that to overcome a mental illness or something like that?
Who
Or is
knows?
that just something that
Like, why would somebody choose to do that? I mean, I guess anything is possible, right? So we live in, I think we live in a universe where anything is possible. Could somebody make that what I would consider a unwise choice? But could somebody make that choice? Yeah, I suppose they could. I don't know why they would, but I suppose it's possible. It's more likely that there's some biological something.
So what happens to your soul plan when something like that happens? I mean, everything you planned out just poof.
What do you mean? The soul plan you make on the other side before you
Right.
commit?
Yeah. Right. That person that comes into this world with the soul plan in mind, and then they something happens at birth, or
Yeah,
they
yeah.
get a
That's what
mental illness because of, I guess, DNA or
DNA, exactly. No, that's why soul plans are not ironclad. They're not absolute. That's why. It's clear that they're not. It's clear that they're not ironclad, absolute, work out exactly as you plan all the time. They're not, because you have a biology that can go wrong, like you said.
Right.
some the DNA, some autoimmune, who knows what. Or, I mean, the example that I give, and I'm not, you guys know, I'm not a religious, not a theologian, and I'm not a religious teacher. That said, most people know the story about Jesus. We live in a Christian country. Not that you have to have been a student of any of this or religious person. But, you know, Jesus was crucified on the cross. Do you think that that was a plan? That's part of the soul plan, to come down and get murdered in a horrific. No, but in fact, the plan was for to come down and teach with John the Baptist into their 60s, 70s, 80s. That, I mean, that was the plan. Did it work out? No. So if that didn't work out, how can you expect that everybody else's plans to always work out? That's the one example I kind of point to. It's like, really? Everybody's plan always works out? Well, how about those guys? And most people consider them fairly self-aware beings, fairly powerful, wise beings. I'm just using very kind of neutral, conservative language, you know? I mean, some people view them as God, but anyway, so, you know, whatever. But I'm using conservative language. Most people consider them fairly wise, intelligent, self-aware, powerful beings. And if that went awry, you know, how can people think that, well, but my soul plan is going to work out because, you know, that's my soul plan. It's always going to work out the way I wanted it. Really? It seems pretty, you know what hubris is? It seems pretty egocentric to me. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So yeah, no, things can go awry. You know, people can change their mind. You know, like Anne Marie said, people can kind of start to come in, a soul come in and say, maybe I changed my mind. I gotta wait. Yeah, maybe one of the, maybe in Lorraine's case, Lorraine brought up this. I'm just going to make this up, Lorraine, but you know, Lorraine's child starts going, and oh, I really missed it, and it starts going down, and then she goes, oh, wait a minute, I got to wait for my mom, Lorraine, oh, no, and then just, you know, bails out, ejects, you know, ejects back into heaven, you know. But Anne Marie, that would not be the reason why the body would miscarry. You see, because the soul and the body are independent. The soul is not necessarily creating the body or making the body live or die. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
So, right? If I don't know, sure if that's where you were going, but I just thought I'd just
Right.
to complete the circle there. But yeah, because I've had experiences myself where I've experienced a, let's say, a baby that was not yet born. I've experienced the soul of that baby coming and going during a very, very difficult childbirth, labor, very painful. And I didn't know what it was until after the fact. I didn't even know that my friend's wife was pregnant, because he and I were friends business-wise, not personally so much. But I didn't even know that his wife was about to give birth. But their daughter came and visited me for an hour and a half. And evidently, the exact timing matched perfectly with when the childbirth was like really, 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 really painful, and the baby was facing the wrong way or something. I don't know the details, but anyway, baby probably said, I'm out of here. I don't go through this right now. I'll go back. And she popped back in right at birth, right when she came. Yeah. So I found out the next morning. I said, I called my friend up for, you know, we were doing business deal together. And I said, Terry, that was really weird. 3:30 to 5 in the morning, something came and visited me in my room. I'm sleeping alone, me and my dog and my cat, the dog and a cat that Sammy just referenced. When they were alive, the dog and the cat, is before I even met Sammy's mom. Yeah, and I'm like, this is like, and the room lit up, like lit up. Some being floodlit my leg. Like, what the heck is going on? And he says, oh wow, that was when
Wow.
His wife was in the terrible, terrible, painful labor. Baby was facing the wrong way and this and that. So, yeah.
Amelia asked about a program to best learn to connect with the children and for mediumship, if you know any programs.
No, I don't. Sorry. That's above my pay grade. That's something that you guys would know better than I. Yeah.
Yeah, we're connected to lots of mediums who teach mediumship, so
Yeah.
I can post some links.
Yeah. Yeah. But my program, you just go to turningwithin.org.
Oh,
Or you can Google my name. The easy thing also, you can go to you can Google my name. Oh, Amelia, she said she did it already. Or you can
Turning
go to
Within.
or go to
Turningwithin.org.
yeah, or go to kelvinchin.org. Kelvinchin.org is my main nonprofit website, and because I have 4 different websites, and all 4 of them are listed on kelvinchin.org because that's the one that the IRS has. So you'll see connections to all the different classes that I teach, et cetera, and programs, and connections to the other websites. Just go to kelvinchin.org.
I'll post that also so she
Yeah.
can have it.
Yeah, that's easy.
Post the
Yeah.
connections.
Yeah. And by the way, I give a free, Sammy and I do this, my daughter, Sam, I still call her Sammy, dad, dad lingo. We give a free initial consultation to anybody in the world about anything that we do. You want to talk about anything, you just send us an email on the contact page on her website, meditationwithsam.com, or any of my websites, kelvinchin.org, or any of my websites. Just send us an email and we'll schedule, and we're here to help people.
Does she teach the same meditation technique that you do? Yes.
Yep. She's an amazing teacher. I think you could kind of tell she's pretty articulate. She really
Yeah.
understands. She really, really understands how to teach this technique in a way, in a proper way, and how to explain it in a really, really clear way. Yeah, she understands all the nuances, all the gray areas, which is really, really cool. I mean, she's, I don't know if you caught it, but she said when she was 2, 3 years old, she used to come and sit on my lap and snuggle on my lap while I was teaching a meditation class to you guys in my living room. Like I'd have 6 or 8, 10 people in my living room. And she just would walk in and out. She's 2, 3 years old. And she'd sit on my lap. She'd sit there for 15, 20 minutes while I'm teaching the meditation. She'd go off.
I've seen her do that still. I mean, recently.
Yeah.
It's cute.
We're very connected, and I'll say this now that she's not on the call with us, but in this book, I talk about how when she was my sister, my older sister, and I was her younger brother 250 years ago, and she died 25 years before I did. I think she was only 40 something when she died. And as the story goes, I went into a depression for like a month. She died. Very, very close. Yeah.
Wow.
Anything else?
That actually gives me hope because I was hoping that I can have another life with my children again.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think the same ones.
And you think they're going to be different? No, I'm just kidding. Same personality, remember?
Just be careful what you wish for, Marlene. But the short answer is absolutely yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely yes. Yeah, Sammy and I've been together at least 3, 4 times that I'm aware of. And Jesse
Wow.
and I have been together at least a few times, my son. And
Wow.
he just had a visit from my father. And if you, like 48 hours ago, my father, who's been dead for 25 years now, visited my son, Jesse. Now, if you know anything, if you've read anything about in this book, my first book, Overcoming the Fear of Death, stories about my dad. My dad believed he was a scientist, so he believed nothing about after. There's no afterlife. There's not your brain and your mind. And when you die, your mind shuts off. That's it. There is no mind other than your brain. That was my dad's belief until he died, and then he started communicating with us at his funeral service the day before, the morning before, the night before, and the morning of his funeral service. And then he's visited my son 48 hours ago, told him some very interesting stuff. And now my dad said he's now aware of some of his past lives. My dad,
Wow.
you've read my first book. My dad is like, let's just say he was somewhat crude about his expression, about his beliefs about, or his non-beliefs about the afterlife. So yeah, and he visited one of my students in Ohio, who I don't even know. I taught this, somebody on Zoom. My dad visited one of my students in a dream, and this guy, his name's Joseph. I didn't even, I taught him to meditate. He contacted me and he said, "I think your dad visited me last night." And I said, "What?" Joseph's like, he's about in his early 50s, and I called him up and he said, "Yeah," he said, I've had lucid dreaming my whole life. Just always remember all my dreams. And last night, Joseph had a dream where Joseph was a pilot flying a World War II bomber over the ocean, and a young Asian officer came from the rear of the plane to the cockpit, and they were talking about hydraulic fluids. Now, Joseph did not know that my dad at Northeastern University studied hydraulics. It's a subspecialty of being a mechanical engineer. Okay, so my dad was specifically a hydraulics expert, and that's what he did in the Second World War. Was my dad was in charge of a whole bunch of B-29 bombers in India and then in China when they were bombing Japan in the U.S. Army Air Corps. And so Joseph said this guy came up, this young Asian officer came to the cockpit. Joseph was flying the plane, and they started talking about the fluids, and yeah, the fluids are all fine. And the young Asian officer looked at Joseph and he said, "You're afraid of death, aren't you?" And Joseph said, "How did you know that? There's only 6 people in the world I've ever told. And I just told the 6th person about 3 weeks ago." And the young Asian officer smiled and looked at him. He said, "Oh yeah, you mean my son? That's my son, Kelvin." That was his dream. This is a guy I didn't even know, right? My dad's like doing his thing. This is my dad, science belief, no heaven, no afterlife, no nothing. That was belief before he died, right? Yeah. Pretty wild, right?
Very cool.
Very
Very interesting.
awesome. I have a question.
Then I sent him a picture. Joseph, I sent him a picture of my dad. And I sent him this picture right after I hung up with him. And I sent him this picture, and he said, "Yep, that's the guy in my dream. That's what he was wearing, and that's his face. That's the guy from my dream." It's a picture of my dad when my dad was 21 years old when he first joined.
Wow.
And wearing his uniform, second lieutenant there in the U.S. Army Air Corps.
Wow.
Yeah. Yep. Crazy, right?
Carmen, you said you had a question?
So, like, let's say we get along really good with someone in this life.
Mm-hmm.
We meet in the afterlife or we've met in previous lives.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have the same relationships with them, or could we in another life really be really close to someone we didn't like in this life? Or
Anything is possible. It's relationship stuff. So it's not really about lifetime to lifetime stuff. It's about relationship stuff. I mean, just think about how you have relationships with people. Now, on this side, does your relationships ever change? Of course they do, right? Sometimes they go south. Sometimes they get better, but they can change. And it's just like that from lifetime to lifetime, right?
I'm asked because my son and us are like, we're best friends. We're extremely close. I mean, we do things together all the time. And that's been my saving grace through this whole grief thing. So that's why I'm wondering is like, are we going to get is it going to be the same type of relationship in the next life, or is it going to change?
It depends if you change, and it depends if your son changes. So
Yeah.
if you don't change, my experience is that when we're talking about personality stuff, it doesn't change very radically from lifetime to lifetime. It
Okay.
takes a long time for things to change. That's because my memories go back 6,000 years. And if you look at my memories I talk about in my book, about my personality over the 6,000 years, you'll see that my memories, at least of my experience, is that my personality has pretty much stayed the same. Now, have I expressed it in different ways? So I have a music thing. I do as playing music, and then so but I have a general music thing, an affinity for music. In some lifetimes, I've written music, not in this lifetime. And sometimes in lifetimes, I've written sonatas in like hundreds of them and so forth. And in this lifetime, not. But I've performed and I've played music in many, many lifetimes. So there's like a thread there. That's an example of like a personality trait that can manifest and express itself in different ways. But in terms of your question, I would say the odds are you're going to get along great in future lifetimes because that's a personality. There's something about your personalities that work together, whatever it is. It works. And those things aren't going to change radically overnight. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. That's a big comfort.
Yeah. 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 That's my experience with my daughter, my son. And then, okay, I'll give you another example that's not, this is not in relation to your question, but it's related. Okay. I've answered your question. You guys are going to be fine. But, I married somebody who I remember being in a lifetime with, not Sammy's mom, but she's not I've been married before. And this lifetime I'm talking about with no children. And, we get along. We're still friends since our divorce many, many, many decades ago, right? When we were in our 20s. But had I remembered I now remember about before, what the personality was like, a couple thousand years ago, whenever it was, I might have made a different decision, but I didn't. All right. So I'm living in the present with all my flaws and flaws in my memories and everything else, like we all are, right? But that's just an example of, I use that sometimes as an example when people say, but we're soulmates because with this incredible connection. I said, well, I had an incredible connection with somebody. It seemed like what you would call a soulmate, but there are other things that I'd forgotten about that weren't real great matches, right? In terms of relationship. So just a mere connection, an incredibly ancient connection with somebody, people call that being a soulmate. It's not it's not necessarily a foundation for a long-term exclusive relationship, right? You always got to use your common sense, but that's separate. That's different from what you were asking, Carmen. That just made me think of it. Yeah.
Olga, is that your daughter turning your television on and off?
Yeah.
Her television was going on and off in the background.
All right, Olga's daughter.
It was, but you know what? My remote's here because at first I thought maybe
I
my
saw
dog touched it, and I'm like, wait, it's here.
Yeah. So
It
your
turned
daughter,
on and off, and it's probably
your
at least
your daughter turned the TV on and off. There you go. See? Yeah, my
Probably.
father's done stuff like that before.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. If we don't have any more questions,
Yep. Great to see everybody.
It was a pleasure, Kelvin, as always. Thank you so much.
It was awesome.
Thank you.
You guys can unmute and say thank you. And we'll
Thank
definitely
you.
do
Thank
this.
you.
Lots more to talk about.
Yeah, thank you, Kelvin. It's a
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Have
Thank
some
you
so
fun.
much.
It
Thank
was
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Night,
you,
everyone.
Kelvin.
You're
Good night,
welcome.
everyone.
Yeah.
I
You
will
have a
send you the
lovely
recording.
daughter.
Yes, I will. I will.
You have a lovely daughter. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. She is a lovely daughter. She's awesome. There's a
Yes,
lot,
she is.
lot of depth there. The waters run deep, as they say.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Bye-bye,
you.
everybody.
You guys.
Bye, Marlene.